It is the night of September 26, 1983. Deep beneath the Soviet Union, inside a concrete bunker outside Moscow, a single alarm begins to scream. Then another, then another. 5 nuclear missiles, the computers say, have just been launched from American soil. They are heading toward the Soviet Union. They will arrive in minutes. Every protocol, every piece of training, every chain of command in the most powerful military machine on Earth is pointing toward one response. Launch. Launch now, before the missiles land, before there is nothing left to launch from. The man sitting at the console has his hand above the button. His name is Stanislav Petrov, and in the next 4 minutes, he will make a decision that no human being should ever have to make alone. You have never heard of Stanislav Petrov. Almost nobody has. He was not a general. He was not a president. He was not a celebrated hero who received a ticker tape parade. He was a 44-year-old Soviet Air Defense Forces officer, an engineer by training, who happened to be working a night shift in a facility called Serpukhov 15. That facility was the nerve center of the Soviet early warning system, a network of satellites orbiting the Earth, watching for the flash of American missile launches. And on that night, it told them the Americans had fired first. To understand why this moment was so close to catastrophic, you have to understand 1983. This was not a calm period in the Cold War. This was arguably the most dangerous year since the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Relations between the United States and the Soviet Union had collapsed to a point of barely disguised hostility. In March of that year, Ronald Reagan had called the Soviet Union an evil empire in a speech that sent shockwaves through Moscow. Weeks later, he announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, a space-based missile defense program, which Soviet leadership interpreted as America preparing for a first strike. They believed Reagan was getting ready to attack. Then, on September 1st, 1983, just 25 days before Petrov's night shift, a Soviet fighter jet shot down Korean Airlines Flight 007 after it accidentally drifted into Soviet airspace. All 269 people on board were killed. The world erupted in fury. Reagan called it a crime against humanity. Soviet officials, embarrassed and defensive, doubled down. The tension between the two superpowers had become something almost physical. It was a pressure cooker with no release valve. And inside that pressure cooker, both sides had their nuclear arsenals on hair-trigger alert. The Soviet military doctrine at the time was built around a terrifying logic. If the Americans launched a first strike, the Soviets would have only minutes to detect it and respond. Wait too long, and the missiles would destroy the Soviet launch infrastructure. There would be nothing left to fight back with. So the system was designed for speed, for instant escalation. You see the signal, you confirm it, you report it up the chain of command, and the chain of command launches. Stanislav Petrov understood this perfectly. He had helped design parts of it. At midnight, the alarm went off. The satellite system Oko, which means eye in Russian, reported a single inbound missile from the United States. Petrov looked at the screen. His training told him to report it. His gut told him to wait. He knew that a genuine American first strike would involve hundreds of missiles, not one. One missile made no strategic sense. But then, the system updated. A second missile, then a third, then a fourth, then a fifth. The computer's reliability indicator, which normally read low confidence, had switched to the highest possible rating. The system was certain. 5 American missiles were in the air. The room around Petrov descended into chaos. Duty officers were shouting. Screens were flashing. The protocol was clear. Report upward immediately so the chain of command could respond. If Petrov picked up the phone and confirmed an attack, the Soviet military would almost certainly launch a retaliatory strike. Hundreds of missiles, aimed at American cities, NATO targets, military installations across Europe. Within an hour, the world as human civilization had built it over thousands of years would effectively be over. Petrov had 5 minutes, maybe less. Here's what no one talks about when they tell this story. Petrov was not supposed to be the person making this call. He was not the commanding officer. His job was to monitor and report, not to analyze and decide. The decision belonged to his superiors. But his superiors were waiting for his report, and he didn't give it. Instead, He picked up the internal phone and told them it was a false alarm. He had no proof. He had no data to contradict the satellite system. He had only his instinct that 5 missiles felt wrong, that the angle of detection seemed off, that ground-based radar was not confirming anything. He called it a false alarm based on a feeling. And he was right. The missiles did not exist. The OCO satellite system had made a catastrophic error. Sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds at a rare angle had mimicked the infrared signature of an American missile launch. A once-in-a-decade atmospheric quirk had nearly ended the world. The system built to protect the Soviet Union had nearly destroyed it, and the planet along with it. One man, sitting in a bunker, trusting his instincts over a machine, had stopped it from happening. Now here's where the story takes a turn that will make you angry. Stanislav Petrov was not celebrated. He was not thanked. He was quietly reprimanded. His superiors were furious. Not because he had made the wrong call, but because in making any call at all, he had exposed a catastrophic flaw in the Soviet early warning system. A flaw they'd spent billions of rubles building. A flaw they could not publicly acknowledge. Petrov had also failed to properly fill out his incident report during the crisis. Understandably, since he was busy trying to prevent nuclear war, and that procedural violation became the official focus. He was transferred, quietly, efficiently, the way uncomfortable truths are transferred in authoritarian systems. He received no commendation, no medal, no acknowledgement. He retired from the military not long afterward and went to live in a small apartment in the town of Fryazevo, outside Moscow. For years, almost nobody outside the Soviet high command knew what had happened that night. The incident was classified, buried, hidden behind the same wall of secrecy that hid everything the Soviet system found inconvenient. The man who had saved the world went home, alone. The story did not surface until 1998, when a retired Soviet general named Yuri Votintsev published his memoirs and mentioned, almost in passing, what Petrov had done. Western journalists picked it up. Slowly, carefully, the story spread. Petrov gave interviews. He was modest to the point of frustration. He deflected credit. He said he was just doing his job, that any rational person would have done the same. But that is not true, and he knew it. The system he worked in was not designed for rational people to override it. It was designed for speed, for obedience, for the unquestioning transmission of data up the chain. Every instinct of Soviet military culture pushed against what he did. He pushed back anyway. In 2006, Petrov traveled to New York and was honored at the United Nations. He received an award from a German peace organization. He met journalists, gave talks, shook hands with people who looked at him with an awe that seemed to confuse and embarrass him. He came across in interviews as a man who had not fully processed what had happened, or perhaps he had processed it too fully. He said once that he felt no pride about that night. He said he had been lucky. That is a remarkable thing to say. The man who was right when every instrument around him said he was wrong called himself lucky. His wife died of cancer in 1997, a year before the world would even learn his name. He lived alone in his apartment. When a documentary filmmaker named Peter Anthony tracked him down in 2014 for a film called The Man Who Saved the World, Petrov was found in his home, barely functional, drinking heavily, deeply isolated. He had no computer, no internet. He didn't fully understand the scale of the attention his story had generated in the West. The documentary is uncomfortable to watch. This is not a triumphant man. This is a man hollowed out by the weight of what he carried. And yet, consider what did not happen on September 26, 1983. No city burned. No children died in a flash of nuclear fire. No mushroom cloud rose over Washington or Moscow or London. No retaliation. No counter-retaliation, no cascading apocalypse that Cold War strategists have been quietly modeling for decades. The population of the Earth, billions of people who had gone to bed that night with no idea a single man in a bunker was holding their future in his hands, woke up the next morning. The sun rose. It was an ordinary day. Because of him, there's a broader lesson here that sits beneath the surface of this story like a current. The systems we build to protect us are only as reliable as the humans inside them. Every fail-safe, every protocol, every piece of technology is ultimately filtered through a human being. On that night, the entire architecture of Cold War deterrence, the satellites, the computers, the chains of command, the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, was brought to a single point. A man in a chair, a phone in his hand, and everything depended not on the system working correctly, but on one person being willing to trust himself when the system said he was wrong. Stanislav Petrov died on May 19, 2017, in his apartment in Fryazevo. He was 77 years old. His death was not announced immediately. It was weeks before the news reached Western media. There was no state funeral, no national moment of recognition. He died the way he had lived after that night, quietly, away from the machinery of history, in the same small, ordinary life the Soviet system had assigned him after he committed the unforgivable act of being right. He saved every person who was alive in 1983. He saved every person born after 1983. He saved cities and hospitals and schools and libraries and everything human beings have ever created or loved or hoped for. He saved your grandparents. He may have saved your parents. He may have saved you. And the world gave him a small apartment, a reprimand, and a death notice that arrived weeks late. The next time you hear someone say that one person cannot change history, remember a concrete bunker outside Moscow. Remember a screaming alarm. Remember a man alone at a console with the world in his hands. And remember that he chose silence over the phone call that would have ended everything. Not because the system told him to, because he decided. One man, one decision, for minutes. That is all that stood between civilization and silence. And history almost forgot to write it down.